At my own retirement party, I lifted my glass and tasted something bitter my daughter-in-law had slipped something into my drink. My chest tightened, but my mind stayed steady. Decades of quiet sacrifice hardening my resolve. That very night, I began rewriting every line of my will, sealing secrets they never expected. What happened at that table was only the beginning. Before I begin the story, tell me, where are you listening from today? I arrived at my own retirement party just as the sun was setting, painting the marsh outside in shades of pale gold. The veranda of my Charleston brick home shimmered with string lights, and the gentle hum of small talk floated in the air. Guests milled around with cocktails in hand, the scent of she-crab soup and lemon bars drifting from the kitchen. At 67, a widow who had just sold my consulting firm, I had been in enough rooms to know when an event was truly for me and when it was for the spectacle. Tonight, the faces I saw told me this was no longer my stage. Neighbors greeted me kindly. "Evening. Aurelia retired. Not tired," one chuckled. "Depends who's doing the counting," I replied with a practiced smile. That small exchange warmed me, but it also framed the contrast. On a side table, photos from my career were arranged neatly, but curiously missing the gritty early years. My son Malric and his wife Seraphine stood by the easel, their polished smiles almost glowing under the lights, as if this night celebrated their future more than my past. When the microphone was passed, the MC introduced me simply as the retiree, then quickly pivoted to praising Malric and Seraphine for hosting and supporting the vision. Applause swelled for them. My note card with a short thank you stayed in my clutch. No one asked for my words. Instead, a guest raised a glass and toasted the next generation, as if I were the starter pistol already fired and discarded. From across the room, I overheard a competitor murmur, "She always had a good eye for hiring." Crediting my decades of grit to luck, I did not interrupt. I smiled politely, even as the spotlight turned toward my children, while I stood near the refrigerator's soft glow as staff swapped trays. Recognition, I reminded myself, was a kind of currency, and tonight counterfeit bills flooded the room. I began to read the room like I used to read board meetings. Who came for me, and who came for the show? Who avoided my gaze, and who lingered too long near Seraphine's diamond tennis bracelet? Seraphine flitted around with the air of a hostess, touching shoulders, checking her phone too often, and hovering near the champagne table. Malric's jaw tightened each time a vendor asked about payments. He followed her cues more than his own instincts. The champagne bar was tucked near the butler's pantry, a pocket of privacy in a crowded house. From there, I noticed the chipped flute, my own glass, kept over the years because it fit my lip just right. I always used it at parties, a small ritual. Seraphine's eyes flickered toward it more than once. She shifted the other flutes around it as if arranging chess pieces, her movements too precise to be casual. I remembered my late husband teasing me about that lucky chip. The memory cut sharp in my chest, but I folded it away, watching around me. Laughter rose by the deviled eggs. A photographer leaned in close for artistic shots, and I stayed still, cataloging everything. Objects remember us, I thought, and sometimes they remember what we would rather forget. Then I saw her hand. From the pantry doorway, I watched Seraphine scan left and right, in one smooth motion. She palmed a tiny vial from her clutch. My breath slowed as a clear liquid slid into the chipped flute. No fizz, no drama, just a coil that vanished into the champagne. She set the glass slightly forward, angled for me, then turned with a smile rehearsed too many times. No one else saw. The bartender's back was turned. I alone carried that image. I did not gasp. I did not rush. My body remembered an old trick: breathe deep. Exhale slower. Look calm. When Seraphine finally carried that flute toward me, saying softly, "You've earned this, Aurelia." I took it with steady hands. I let the light catch the chip as if admiring it. Did we open the brute or the extra dry, I asked. Shifting her focus, keeping the glass near but not to my lips, she blinked. Confused for just a moment, I placed the stem precisely on the console table, aligning the base with a small nick in the wood only I would notice. Across the room. Malric's sentence trailed off as his eyes caught mine. I smiled thinly, deliberately. Looking straight at Seraphine, "Let's make this a night to remember," I said. The party roared back to life around me, string lights buzzing like restless bees, while inside me, the ledger began a new page. I had just set the glass down when another hand reached for it. My eyes followed the chipped rim as Elvira Voss, Seraphine's mother, lifted it with a careless laugh. The string lights hummed. A spoon clinked against crystal, and her shoes tapped the parquet in time with the music. Everything around me seemed ordinary, but the moment was not. I stood still, my breath held tight, as if I were diving underwater. Someone nearby murmured, "To the matriarch," and Crystal answered in a soft chorus. I did not move. I let the scene play, every detail burning into memory. Not every rescue, I reminded myself, is a reach. Sometimes it's the choice not to grab. Elvira tilted her head back and drank. I could not unsee the rhythm of her throat as the bubbles vanished. At first, nothing, then a blink, too slow. Her fingers slackened. The flute slipped, and the thin ring of glass echoed against the table before shattering on the marble floor. Gasps cut through the room. "Call 911, someone shouted, panic slicing through polite laughter. A guest fumbled desperately with a phone that refused to unlock. Elvira collapsed, her body striking the tile with a dull finality. I dropped to my knees beside her, the crowd hesitating, paralyzed by fear. My hands remembered old training from a CPR course I once thought I'd never need. I checked her airway, leaned close to count her breaths. Steady though shallow. She's still breathing. I called out, keeping my tone calm. "We need paramedics. Now." To the dispatcher, I gave clear details: the address, her estimated age, her symptoms, the exact time she had taken that sip. I never used the word poison. Precision mattered. Panic would only cloud the truth. Crisis is a mirror, I thought, and mine showed discipline. Seraphine's wail broke the silence. Shrill and practiced, mascara perfectly intact. She clutched Malric's arm, her voice breaking in all the wrong places. He hovered uselessly, hands rising and falling as if uncertain where to place them. I asked for water, a towel, and space around Elvira. My words carried the weight of command, and people obeyed. A neighbor reached for my elbow. "Aurelia. Dear." But I smiled him off and kept directing. "Authority is quieter than fear. It sounds like verbs." The MC, voice trembling, tried to steer the chaos. "Let's give them room. Our hostess did a beautiful job tonight." I heard the word hostess land squarely on Seraphine. Applause rippled weakly, and someone muttered, "Retired ladies got quite a crowd." The words bit deep. Seraphine, breathless, thanked everyone for supporting the next chapter, as if the evening had been her passing of the torch. I stood at the edge of the room, refrigerator light catching my face once more, and took in the applause that aged me by decades. When people rename you, I thought, they aren't confused, they're campaigning. I reclaimed control by inches. "You." I pointed, "Wait outside for the paramedics. You. Clear this walkway. Set the champagne bottle and the chipped glass aside." The bartender nodded. No questions asked. Malric urged me toward a chair. "I'm steady on my feet," I answered flatly. Seraphine leaned in for a hug. I let her miss me by an inch. Dignity is posture when forgiveness is premature. Sirens cut through the night. EMS swept in, practiced and swift. Questions, vitals, a stretcher rolling forward, the crowd splitting in silence. I gave the facts, never the why. Seraphine interjected about new vitamins, her voice quivering with invention. Malric added, "Mom's exhausted. This is a lot for her." Only to be ignored by a paramedic focused on Elvira. The gurney wheeled out, string lights flickering in the draft. Lies needed an audience, but truth, I knew, needed a notebook. The kitchen filled with aftershock. Guests left in clumps, their voices rising with self-importance. The MC, red-faced, offered me the mic at last. "Let's save speeches for a better night," I said. His ears flushed crimson. An old colleague muttered, "You had a good run," and the past tense wired through me like electricity. I smoothed the linens on the console table, edge to edge, restoring order, looking directly at Seraphine. I said evenly, I'll check on Elvira in the morning. Her smile faltered. Mercy, I thought, is sometimes just postponing the verdict. By the time the last guest shuffled out to the porch, Malric asked, Mom, do you want to stay with us tonight? No, I replied, firm. I'll be just fine in my own house. I gathered the chipped flute and the open bottle into a paper bag, slid my unused note card inside, and tucked it beneath the sink. I turned back to Seraphine and said clearly, Tomorrow we'll do this properly. Her breath caught, and the lights above burned steady, bright, unyielding. The marsh outside glowed with the faintest shimmer of dawn, and my kitchen smelled of fresh coffee instead of last night's chaos. I sat at the table, the brown paper bag with the chipped flute and champagne tucked under the sink like a sentinel. My finger hovered over the phone. Roderick Hale's number halfway dialed. When the doorbell rang, Malric and Seraphine stood there, smiling too wide, carrying paper bags and a cardboard drink tray. We brought breakfast. Seraphine sang, her tone as bright as the rising sun. I let them in, noting how she avoided looking at the locked cabinet. She said Elvira was stable at the hospital, but her eyes gleamed as if she were delivering good news from a pulpit. I seated them in the breakfast nook, my ground, my rules, and poured my own coffee slowly. When people rush your morning, they're trying to outrun your thinking. Seraphine wasted no time. She spread glossy brochures across the table, smiling seniors. Water aerobics, cocktail socials, Sunset Haven, she announced, her nails clicking the paper. Malric chimed in. Only 20 minutes from us. Mom, we could visit all the time. His voice carried that rehearsed, dutiful sun tone. I asked about costs, refundability, arbitration clause. Seraphine rattled off answers too fast, skipping details about medical transfers and fine print. She circled amenities instead, like a pool would make up for my independence. I studied the text entrance fee up front. Refund varies. Medical care is determined. Sales pitch is a sunrise for the seller, for the buyer. It can be fog. I read one line aloud. Entrance fee due in full within 5 business days. Silence followed. Seraphine reached across. Squeezing my hand, you deserve safety. Aurelia, she said, flattening my title to a first name. Malric leaned forward. Last night showed us how vulnerable things can get. He conflated Elvira's collapse with my own health, as if one woman's fainting spell erased my strength. I corrected him gently. She fell. I didn't. Their eyes flicked to each other. Nerves in the fine print of their faces. A gilded cage is still a cage. Gold only muffles the sound of the lock. Then came the real pitch. Seraphine leaned in. At your age, falls happen. Wouldn't it be better to decide now, before we have to? Malric nodded gravely. I sipped coffee and let them finish their duet. Then I answered, I passed my physical. I walk every morning. I still teach literacy classes downtown. Seraphine pressed. Last night was a wake-up call. I countered. For Elvira, not me. I saw their subtext consolidate, isolate, liquidate. We're not making medical decisions on a brochure. I said, concern without respect is just control in Sunday clothes. Seraphine wasn't done. From her tote, she pulled a neatly tabbed packet, fluorescent flags marking sign here. Across the top, durable power of attorney, immediate authority, not springing, banking, real estate, healthcare, all bundled like one careless knot. It's just precaution, Malric insisted, so we can help pay bills. I scanned the blanks for successor agents left empty, a doorway for manipulation. Who drafted this? I asked. Seraphine replied too quickly. A friend, I smiled thinly. Friends don't draft my life. If a signature is the doorway, the wording is the floor you'll stand on or fall through. I requested copies for my attorney, snapped a photo of the first page, and slid the pen away with its cap on. No one signs legal documents at a kitchen table. Not in this house. Malric's shoulders stiffened, but Seraphine tried to smooth over. Of course no rush. Boundaries don't need volume, they need verbs. As they packed their brochures, a white envelope slipped from Seraphine's tote. My eyes caught it before hers did. Premium notice life insurance. Insured A. Gant. She stuffed it back, but too late. I let silence hold its weight, then said evenly, send me PDFs of everything you want me to consider. Our gazes locked a beat longer than courtesy allows. They left with air kisses, and I turned the deadbolt with finality. Then I dialed Roderick Hale. "I need you today," I said. Evidence now had neighbors' brochures stacked beside the brown bag. Paper trails don't lie, they just wait. I locked the cabinet under my sink, the brown paper bag with the flute and bottle sealed away, and slipped the small brass key into my blazer pocket. The garden was still wet with dew, light skimming off the azaleas. When I dialed Roderick Hale's office, he could see me by late morning. I carried no folders, no paper, just my phone, the glossy brochures Seraphine had pushed across my table yesterday, and a calm that felt like steel wrapped in linen. I spoke aloud as I gathered myself. Verify any insurance. Preserve evidence. Never alert Malric or Seraphine. Before I was ready. Words rehearsed into armor. Preparation is kindness to your future self. Roderick welcomed me with a legal pad and a steady eye. We sat in his paneled office while I listed what I had seen, what I had locked away, and what I suspected. He explained the rules: photograph every item, seal it, log the time, refrigerate the bottle until a certified lab could test it. He drew sharp lines between legal tools subpoenas, preservation letters, insurer authorizations. No direct contact with them yet, he cautioned. I handed him the brochures. He underlined arbitration clauses and the broad immediate authority language they had tried to slide across my kitchen table. We photographed every page of the packet. Careful to note we hadn't signed a thing. Order is the scaffolding that holds up truth. From his conference phone, we called the insurer. After confirming my identity with the rep birth date, social security digits, address, I heard the quiet thud of fact, a $500 000 policy, issued 6 months ago. Owner Seraphine Voss, beneficiary Seraphine Voss, premiums current, policy active. Roderick's pen scratched across his pad. Contestability, misrepresentation, caregiver justification. He requested a formal disclosure packet be sent directly to me by secure email. We logged the time, the rep's ID, the case number. Facts don't flinch when you shine a light. Roderick shifted to strategy. 2 tracks, he said: civil protection and criminal preservation. He would arrange a geriatric evaluation not to prove weakness, but to slam the door on any future lie about my competence. I nodded. We spoke of medical directives, banking safeguards, custody alerts for unusual transfers. I asked about notifying hospital security. Not yet. He said, wait for toxicology, wait for the insurer's packet. I agreed. My power would come in papers, not in premature accusations. Strategy is emotion on a leash. At lunch, I met a former colleague at a cafe on Broad Street. She leaned close over her coffee and lowered her voice. Malric asked my husband for a bridge loan, said he had paperwork for you and a doctor who could help. The phrase soured in my stomach. She mentioned Seraphine bragging about locking down the estate before tax changes hit. She promised to forward texts if she found them. Her hug goodbye was brief but steady. Watch your back, she whispered. Gossip is a rumor. A warning is a breadcrumb. I stopped at St. Mary's Hospital that afternoon. At the desk, I asked only for a general update. Elvira Voss was stable, still under observation. I left a note with my number, signed just my name, down the corridor. I glimpsed Seraphine whispering with billing. Posture tight, voice clipped. I didn't approach. I memorized the nurse's name, the time, the antiseptic scent in the air. Then I walked out without spectacle. Restraint is choosing the fight you can win twice now and on paper. Back home, my laptop pinged. A secure email arrived. Policy information insured A. Gant. I opened it. Owner and beneficiary Seraphine Voss. Issue date lined up exactly with Malric's whispered loan. I forwarded the file to Roderick, then typed one text to my son. We need to speak tomorrow. At my house. I slipped the insurer's PDF into a folder labeled Sunset, next to the photos of the chipped flute, standing in my husband's study. I spoke aloud, steady as stone. This ends on my terms. Documents don't love you, they defend you. Dusk folded itself across the garden, and my house sat in its hush like a fortress. The PDF from the insurer was filed under Sunset, cabinet doors locked, key resting in my pocket. I sat at my husband's old desk, phone face down, waiting for a call I hadn't scheduled but knew would come. Beside the brass lamp leaned a photograph of Isley, missing her front tooth. Grinning at me from 8 years old, I steadied my breath to the rhythm of cicadas. Floorboards popping as the house cooled. A text buzzed. Roderick confirmed mobile notary tonight. What you defend best is often what you love most quietly. The call came not from Roderick, but from Isley. Her voice was low. Background noise of a television too loud and adult voices muffled behind a closed door. "Grandma, are you okay?" she whispered. I kept my own tone calm. Sentences short. She said her parents argued about money and papers, about making sure you sign. I pressed my lips together. Anger sharp but hidden. I told her to rest, to breathe, to do her homework tomorrow as though life was steady. I promised her pancakes with strawberries this weekend, and I meant it. Strength isn't always a wall. Sometimes it's a breakfast you still plan to cook. Later. Roderick appeared on my screen. His tie was loosened, but his mind was precise. Together we built a fortress of paper, a revocable living trust, naming me as trustee. A no-contest clause that clipped greedy hands, a spendthrift provision that made Malrick's schemes worthless, healthcare directives refreshed, springing powers of attorney narrowed to a 2-physician trigger, charitable bequests earmarked for causes I cherished literacy, cancer research so that no one could erase them, an independent trustee, CPA oversight, audit triggers, good paperwork is a fence with no loose boards. An hour later, the mobile notary arrived. IDs scanned, seals pressed, signatures laid down one after another, will, trust, pour-over clauses, beneficiary updates. My estate was no longer theirs to twist. Malrick would see only a modest annuity tied to lawful behavior. Seraphine's name was struck entirely, her exclusion written clear to prevent her clause from sinking into anything I'd built. Originals locked in Roderick's vault, certified copies in my safe. Silence is loud when a seal strikes paper. Then the evidence arrived like lightning. My colleague's email contained screenshots Malrick to a lender. Once she signs, everything's solved. Another Seraphine to Malrick tomorrow is our window. Don't let her think too long. The timestamps match their breakfast ambush. I read the words twice, not for heartbreak, but for accuracy. When their plans speak in writing, you don't need to raise your voice. I turned to practical defenses. Banking fortified with 2-factor verification, alerts on withdrawals, custodian notes requiring a password phrase, home security passcodes updated, certified documents stored in duplicate. The brown paper bag with the flute and bottle slid into a dedicated fridge with a thermometer, logged like evidence in a trial. Locks aren't distrust. They're memory aids for the future you. By midnight, I staged the battleground. 2 chairs in the living room faced the console table where the flute once sat. My phone charged, recorder tested, a card under the coaster with 4 words. I changed everything. Lights out, silence deep, my heart steady, my hands less so. Before bed, I texted Isley pancakes Saturday. You pick the toppings. Her reply came fast, a single heart. Courage is a room you set up before you invite anyone in. I opened every curtain in the living room, letting in clear Charleston daylight. Fragile vases were moved into cupboards, leaving only 2 chairs facing the console table. That table, where the chipped flute had once rested, was now my bench. My phone recorder tested, a backup hidden in a hollowed book on the shelf. I verified the log on the mini fridge flute and bottle secured and slid the insurer's PDF and screenshots into a folder labeled Sunset. At 11:55, I texted Roderick. They're due at noon. Wait nearby. His reply came quick, 2 blocks away. The doorbell rang twice. Exactly the signal of confidence I expected. Justice needs light and a table, everything else is posture. Malrick carried a leather folio. Seraphine, her tote heavy with tabs. They dressed as if walking into a boardroom, not my living room. I gestured to the chairs, no couches, no comfort, and left the coffee tray out of reach. Ground rules, I said evenly. 1 at a time, brief answers. Seraphine's voice draped with sugar after the scare. We want to help you feel safe. Malrick pushed a pen forward. Mom, let's just sign a few basics. I slid it back to the center, untouched. If you can't control the people, control the furniture. Seraphine reframed the ambulance at my party as your wake-up call. I corrected her. It was Elvara's crisis, not mine. Malric tried again. At your age, what if you were alone? I countered with facts, my clean physical, my morning walks. Then I asked, why did my retirement party erase me? Seraphine blinked too long before muttering something about celebrating the next chapter. I placed the insurer's summary on the table. Owner and beneficiary, Seraphine Voss. Date aligned with their whispered loans. Anger is gasoline. Aim it at the engine, not the curtains. I read the numbers aloud. Steady as scripture. 500,000 and issue date 6 months ago. Premiums current. Who suggested this policy? Silence. Seraphine tried. It's common for caregivers, I cut in. Caregiver, owner, and beneficiary all in one. That's not care. That's motive. Then I slid the screenshots Malric's line. Once she signs, everything's solved. Seraphine's tomorrow is our window. Don't let her think too long. Malric sputtered. We meant paperwork. I asked. Which paperwork requires me not to think? Their eyes darted at the empty successor agent line in their template. Who fills blanks and when their silence answered better than words. If the truth is on your side, you don't need rehearsal. Malric's mask cracked. We needed certainty. He blurted. I leaned in. Certainty of what my compliance or my absence. Seraphine waved it off. You're reading too much into texts. I read the timestamps aloud, matching the morning they'd ambushed me with that power of attorney. Then I slid the brochure across, tapping the clause on entrance fees and arbitration. Who benefits if I move in by Friday? Malric reached for the folder. My hand landed first. No. Boundaries are sentences that end in periods, not question marks. With one click, my television lit up. The security clip filled the screen. Seraphine in profile. Clutch open, vial in hand, liquid dripped into the chipped flute. The faint ring of crystal, timestamp in the corner, she froze, then laughed brittle. That could be anything. I paused the frame on the drop hitting champagne. I listed chain of custody retrieval, storage, witness, pending lab, Malric muttered. Just Seraphine, then stopped himself. Too late. A camera doesn't argue, it remembers. I dictated aloud into my recorder. Today, noon. Attendees Malric Dorn, Seraphine Voss, documents shown insurer summary. Text screenshots, video clip. I texted Roderick proceed with next step. His reply came back, understood. I handed them a printed notice, all future legal contact must go through counsel. No signatures, no pen. The bottle and flute are secured for testing. Police will receive copies. Then I asked, did either of you consult a psychiatrist about me? Their silence struck like a gavel. Silence is sometimes the truest confession. My phone rang. Caller ID St. Mary's Hospital. A nurse's voice. Elvara Voss is awake. She asked to speak with you privately. I looked at Seraphine and Malric, still perched in the chairs I chose, then back at the phone. Tell her I'm on my way. I said I closed the folder, took my keys, and left them sitting in their own silence. The next door opens when you finish the room you're in. I drove to St. Shreya's with the windows cracked just enough to let in the salt air. My purse sat on the passenger seat, recorder tucked inside, already whispering the time and purpose of my visit into a private memo. At the reception desk, I gave only what was needed: my name, Elvara Voss's room number, and the fact that she had asked for me. I didn't say poison. A nurse pointed me toward the elevators after confirming short visit, she's weak. I texted Roderick Hale that I'd arrived. His reply buzzed back, remember consent. Ask open, don't lead. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and warmed plastic, a film that clung to memory. 6 doors down, I slowed, counted my steps, and stopped outside hers. You don't need to raise your voice when you're sure of your turn. I pushed the door gently. The blinds were half closed, TV muted, condensation sliding down a plastic cup. Elvara, it's Aurelia, I said softly. Her eyes opened at the sound of my voice. I offered her an ice chip before anything else. She asked me to close the door, so I did, leaving a small crack to keep the ward's hum alive. We can stop at any time. I told her. Nothing leaves this room unless you want it to. She nodded. The kind of exhale that speaks of nights holding secrets too long. Respect is the key that opens memory without breaking it. Her words came slow. She spoke of the champagne, bitter, metallic, her tongue numb along the edges. She described Seraphine at the drinks table, pulling a tiny bottle from her clutch, tilting it over a flute with a chip on the rim. She mimed the swirl of liquid that didn't fizz. "I thought it was some fancy flavoring," she said, eyes watering, not from pain, but from clarity. She remembered telling me, "Interesting champagne," and then darkness. I asked if I could record her account. She nodded. I placed the phone on the tray, face down, and let her repeat every detail. My question's simple, factual. Truth doesn't need embroidery, it needs breath. I anchored her memory to time cake served, neighbor's toast, the guitarist's song. Each marker placed her collapse within minutes. She remembered the bartender's back turned, and a guest taking a selfie near the hallway. Potential witnesses. She gave consent for me to share her recording with my attorney and the police. I repeated her permission on tape. I showed her the photo of the chipped flute on my phone. She gasped softly and touched the screen. That's it. Details are the handrails people hold when the stairs are steep. When I stepped back into the corridor, Seraphine was already at the nurse's station. Voice low, face painted with worry. "Aurelia, how is Mom?" she asked. I answered evenly. "Stable." Then asked the nurse for a copy of visitation rules. Seraphine's smile flickered at the formality. She tried to guide me toward the family lounge. I shifted back toward the door. She whispered about moving forward as a family. I said only, with clarity, and brought Elvira fresh ice. You can stand your ground without announcing your borders. In the parking deck, I forwarded the audio file to Roderick, recorded with consent. Key points time-stamped. His reply came quick. He would prepare a sworn affidavit and file a preservation request for hospital camera footage. I confirmed the lab appointment for the bottle and flute. He added a detective's email to the thread. The pieces converged: video, insurer documents, texts, and now Elvira's voice. A case isn't a story you tell. It's a bridge you build. At home? Isley's text glowed. "Grandma, can I still come Saturday? I sent back a photo of strawberries." She replied, "I'm proud of you." With a heart, pancakes and strawberries became a promise written on my grocery list. Love is the quiet weight that keeps your papers from blowing away. The phone rang again. The toxicology lab confirmed my morning slot. A second message blinked from a detective's office. "Bring items and footage." I looked at the brown paper bag in my study. Tomorrow. It would walk into the light. I locked the door, whispered to myself, "We stop pretending now, and let the house fall into silence." Morning is when truth keeps its appointments. Dawn broke pale over Charleston as I placed the brown paper bag on the passenger seat and drove toward the state lab. I spoke softly into my recorder, noting the time, the route, and the condition of the seals. The streets were nearly empty, the marsh light cutting silver through the windshield. At intake, I signed the chain of custody form, watched the technician photograph the evidence, and confirmed the plant alkaloids panel on the order sheet. Every initial and timestamp mattered. I texted Roderick Hale. Drop-off complete. His reply was swift. "Detectives meeting at 9. Keep your answers factual." I drove back across the bridge, breathing through the sting of what nearly became my obituary. Mornings don't erase the night, they just give you better light to read it. By mid-morning, the lab called preliminary results flagged positive for oleander compounds. Their words were measured, but the weight pressed heavy. At Charleston PD, the detective spread my packet across the table. Insurer summary, Elvira's recorded statement, text screenshots, and the home security clip. "Walk me through custody." He said, "I recited it when I saw the vial. How I secured the flute and bottle." Roderick's witness signature. He outlined next steps: a warrant, hospital toxicology, bartender interviews. I left with a case number and a quiet kind of relief. Justice now moved with its own legs. Justice is not a sprint, it's paperwork with a pulse. At Roderick's office, the notary's seal waited. We prepared formal notices for Malrick and Seraphine estate plan updated, enforceable. Copies available by appointment only. Pour-over will, spendthrift and no contest clauses, automatic forfeiture tied to exploitation or harm, assets already retitled, independent trustee named, a clause forbidding involuntary placement without dual physician certification. Roderick slid the pages across, and the notary pressed the seal again and again, each strike like a small sun on parchment. I signed a final letter in my own hand. This reflects my current wishes. A seal isn't loud, but it carries more weight than a shout. I sent Malrick a message. Stop by at 4 to discuss logistics. Neutral tone, deliberate wording, back at my house. I cleared the living room again, 2 chairs facing the console table, bare except for space. The television cued to the thumbnail of the security clip, muted, waiting. On the entry table, 2 sealed envelopes addressed to them, each with Roderick's letter, a pen placed beside. I texted the detective the meet time. Her reply, copy, unit staged nearby. You can invite someone to a conversation or to a consequence. Either way, it's your doorbell. They arrived together, rehearsed smiles faltering when I handed them the envelopes. Seraphine's eyes caught the words forfeiture upon felony, and her color drained. A lab screen was positive. I said calmly, the police have what they need. No lecture, just coordinates. A knock came. 2 officers entered with the detective. Seraphine was asked to stand. The charge of attempted murder was read aloud, handcuffs secured with steady hands. Malrick froze, then stammered. I didn't before the detective recited his text about once she signs. Neighbors paused on the sidewalk. Afternoon light cut clean through the window. My porch camera recorded everything. Reputation walks. Truth arrives in a patrol car. Malrick begged for time and understanding. I offered neither, only terms. The annuity tied to lawful conduct. Contesting meant forfeiture. I loved the boy you were, I told him, but I don't recognize the man who stood by. His eyes fell to the floor. I handed him a resource list, debt counseling, legal aid, compassion without access. He left without signing. I slid the signed receipt copies into a folder labeled served. Mercy is a porch light, not an open safe. By evening, I called Isley. Pancakes are still on, I promised. Her laugh carried across the line. The chipped flute and bottle rested in the evidence fridge, chain intact, at the kitchen table. I wrote checks for charities I'd chosen long ago. Legacy was always meant to move forward. Elvira texted a heart and thank you. I sent back, rest, we're almost there. Peace isn't silence, it's the sound of locks clicking where they belong. Night came, and with it, a final call from Roderick Toxicology confirmed oleander. The case advancing toward court. I hung up, set flour and eggs on the counter for morning pancakes with Isley, and opened the back door. We kept the garden. I told my late husband's memory. A white envelope slid through the mail slot acknowledgement of the hospital camera request. The process marched steady as tide. I turned off the porch light, knowing tomorrow belonged to truth, not fear. Revenge fades. Accountability teaches.